need to be calendarized, so to speak.
Yeah.
So that's the case. All right, I'm going to get started with the sponsors, and hopefully the guys that were at the Minion will be getting on board. Sorry. Okay. Learning sponsors for a year of learning. Paul and Bob Bromberg, in memory of their dear friend Julian Smith, Yehuda ben Yisrael. In memory of Malcolm Mann, former member, in memory of her family murdered in the Holocaust. Arav Tzvi Hirsch ben Shlomo Yaakov, Sarah bat Ephraim, Yisrael David ben Arav Tzvi Hirsch, Ephraim ben Arav Tzvi Hirsch, Adia bas Arav Tzvi Hirsch, Miriam bas Arav Tzvi Hirsch, Pesel bas Arav Tzvi Hirsch, Shalom ben Harav Tzvi Hirsch, Shlomo Yaakov ben Harav Tzvi Hirsch, Shmuel ben Harav Tzvi Hirsch, Cheryl Scher, her children and grandchildren, in memory of her uncle, founding member of BRS, Dr. Israel Brook, Yisrael ben Harav Akiva, Marcia Federbush and family, in memory of her husband, Dr. Uriel Paul Federbush, Uriel Pinchas ben Harav Shimon, Sharon and Fred Lisker, their family and many friends, in memory of her dear mom, Harriet Friedman, Edel Bas Yaakov, Leslie and Gail Kaplan, in memory of their parents, Harry and Marjorie Sedell, and Irving and Pearl Kaplan, friends of Avi Gitler, Avram Meir ben Shimon, and Martha Gitler, China Bas Yeshaya, friends of Toby Peres, Saratova Bat Yisrael Dov, friends of Malka Levi, Malka Bat Yosef.
Anybody else having problem with the connection?
No, can you hear me, Marvin, all right?
I hear you, but you keep freaking on and off.
Oh, I don't know why.
Okay.
Okay.
Steve, you're not having a problem?
No.
All right. Erwin, you're okay?
All right.
Friends of Joe Wolf, Yosef Ben Chaim, many, that's me, many friends of Dr. Marvin Blush, Moshe Shalom Ben Yitzchak Halevi. Month of Learning by B. Pizer in memory of her father, Yitzchak Ben Shmuel. Mordechai and Miriam Burr in memory of his mother, Manya Basarav Shimon Halevi. Cheryl Scher in honor of those who joined her first series of epistemology of Tefillah classes. A Week of Learning by Michael and Judy Poretsky in memory of his mother, Rachel Bas Avram. By Jack Gilman in memory of his brother, Zev Yosef Ben Yitzchak. By Sharon and Michael Glass in memory of her mother, Chaya Bas Avram Baruch. By Susan and Ron Podolsky in memory of her mother, Chaya Bas Avraham Dov. A Day of Learning by Gladys Sherman today in memory of her mother, Gidl Bas Issachar, as well as a Day of Learning in memory, that was plus Torah Fund, and a Day of Learning today by Ari and Judy Cohen in memory of his father, Avram Ben Yisrael Moshe HaKohen. May the Shamas have an Aliyah, Crank Rafia, Velti Yeshir Shema Talia, and the Chol B'nai Israel, a good gebenched Yar. Okay. We are starting Yoma today. Remember, 11 o'clock, whether in person in the shul, at the sukkah, or on Zoom, is the Siyum. Okay. And we'll finish up a little bit what was left of Shkalim. And Meish Kranzler will give, I'm sure, a nice introduction to Yoma. So I'm not giving any extensive introduction today. And I just want to say that unlike some other Masechtas, Yoma is totally focused on Yom Kippurim, okay, and follows it in a chronological pattern. And so we begin actually the first Mishnah with a discussion of events prior to the coming of the 10th of Tishrei, 7 days earlier beforehand. And that's where we're starting. I see Bob is on. Okay. So we'll start. Okay. I just want to point out that the Mishnah starts, okay, with an interesting problem, but we're not going to go into it in terms of the language. Why does it say Shiv'at Yamim instead of Sheva Yamim? Okay? In either case, it says, Shivat Yamim Kodem Yom HaKippurim, 7 days before this occasion of Yom Kippur, which we know being the 10th of Tishrei, Mafrishin Kohen Gadol Mibeito Lelishkat Parhadrin. We remove the Kohen Gadol from his home and bring him to the chamber of the advisors, the counselors, the authority. Okay, Rashi has a comment. Okay, here that may be worth looking at. Okay, just very quickly. Okay, he says, "Mefaresh lama nikrain kain vehitkinan lo, mazminin kohen acher, etc." So, in other words, it is apparently those rabbis that had some authority. Okay, and what did they do with this Kohen Gadol? Matkinim lo Kohen acher tachtav shema ya'ara bo pasul. And while they do that, okay, they also prepare a second Kohen, perhaps it was the Skan HaKohanim, in case a pasul, a blemish or something for the Kohen Gadol. Now, slight, quick historical element. Remember, at a certain point in time in the Bayit Sheni, the position of Kohen Gadol was available for purchase. Okay, and so therefore, not all of the individuals were of the, let's call it, education that the rabbis expected them to be for conducting the entire Yom Kippur procedure, avoda. And so that was one of the reasons we could present from a historical perspective as to why they had to separate or remove the Kohen Gadol and instruct him. Okay, we said the second element being that they arranged for a, let's say, substitute or a Kohen Gadol in case something happened to the Kohen Gadol by a blemish or something else. Okay, now we're on the third line. Rabbi Yehuda Omer, he says, Af isha acheret matkinim lo. According to him, they even had to have a second, perhaps, wife, a second woman available as a wife. Okay, remember that part of the reason it being that it said that he is, according to the Torah, he looks to bring atonement for himself, ubeito. Okay, as the Mishnah is going to tell us, Shema Tamut Ishto, lest his wife die, Shne'amar v'chaper ba'ado u'ba'ad beito, that he seeks atonement for himself and his household. And the household, beito, zo ishto. That means he must have a wife. Amrulo, but the other sages said to Rabbi Yehuda, Im kain, ein l'davar sof. All right, if that's the approach you take, it could go on for other issues as well. Okay, I now come to the Gemara. Tnan hatam. Okay. By the way, again, remember we're back to Babylonian Aramaic. Okay, unlike the Yerushalmi, the Palestinian Aramaic. Okay, that was in Shkolim. Okay, so we learned elsewhere. Okay, Shivat, in other words, perhaps another Mishnah or a different Braita. Okay, or even regarding a pasuk. Shivat Yamim Kodem Sreifat HaPara Hayu Mafrishin Kohen HaSorefet HaPara Mibeito. Okay, that 7 days before the burning of the Para Aduma. Okay, that was used, remember, for purposes of purification, tahara. They would separate the Kohen whose responsibility it was to burn the para aduma from his home, the lishka, to some chamber, she'al pnei habira, that was located at the, let's call it at the bira for a moment. Tzfona, in the north, mizracha, the east. So whatever that bira term is, we're going to see momentarily, was located in the northeast corner of the Azara, uleshkat beit ha'even, and to the chamber of hewn stone. Okay. Now, remember that was also considered the chamber where the Beit Din Hagadol would meet. Haitan Nikret, okay, and it was called, this chamber, the chamber of hewn stone. V'lama nikra shma lishkat Beit ha'even, and why was it called the chamber of hewn stones, right? Shekol ma'aseh bekli gelalim, bekli avanim, ubekli adama, because all of the utensils that were used there were utensils either made out of dung, or utensils made out of stone, or utensils made out of earth. My Tama, what would be the reason
Rabbi?
for this?
Rabbi?
Yes.
How can a dung vessel be ritually pure?
Okay. All right. Good question. Well, let's think about it for a quick moment. Okay. One translation, by the way, does not render it as dung, but it says it's cobblestones. Okay. But dung would have been hardened. Okay. Could have been dipped in the mikvah. And then because of its changed status,
Yes.
it becomes like stone. And that's the
No, right.
right?
It's like a new thing.
Right. Okay. I'm not using the art scroll for this, so I don't see what its translation is, but the Koren did have dung as its translation. Okay. Right. Why, says the Gemara, my tema, what's the reasoning? Kevan de tvul yom kasher b'para. Okay, so why was this? Okay, why did they use, in other words, stone implements, a stone or non-cheres? Let's use that term for the moment, okay? Non-ceramic items, because remember, ceramic items, number one, to be tahor, had to be broken. Number two, okay, if it's stone item or made from earth directly, it's not makabel tuma.
It doesn't get to me.
Right. So kevan de tful yom kasher b'para, because the rabbis generally held that a kohen who was a tvul yom, or even if it wasn't the kohen, but generally it was a kohen that did the para aduma, okay, that even if he was a tvul yom, he had immersed that day, and it was before nightfall, they felt he was suitable to do the para aduma, ditnan, as we're taught elsewhere again, and this time elsewhere in the Gemara, metam'in hayu hakohen hasoref et hapara umatbilin oto, that they would purposely make this kohen impure, the one who was going to be burning the para aduma, and then after they purposely made him tameh, then they purposely immersed him. And why did they do that? Lahotzi miliban shel tzidukim, in order to remove from the heart, in other words, from the mindset, the approach of the Sadducees. Okay? Shahayu omrim, why? Because they used to say, b'me'urvei hashemesh, that only those who had who had gone to mikvah, who had immersed and became pure, but then waited till nightfall, only those were the ones who would be eligible to do para aduma. Haitana esate, okay, until after nightfall, takinu la, Rabbanan, Kli Galilim, Kli Avanim, Ukli Adama. And so therefore the rabbis, okay, enacted that they use non-cheres items, utensils of stone, utensils of earth, or utensils of dung or cobblestone. Deloli kliblu tuma, because these are not capable of becoming tameh. Ki hechi deloli zezule ba, in order so that the Sadukim and others would not denigrate. Right? So now the Gemara goes on. Ma'ishna tzafona mizracha. So why does it, what's so unique, what's different here about the fact that it said that they brought him to the northeast corner of the Azara? Kevan dechatati. Why? Because we're saying that the para aduma is considered in the same category as a chatas, as a sin offering. V'chatas te'unat tzafona. And a sin offering, chatas, required its slaughter to be in the north corner, the north area of the Azara. Now remember, by the way, that the para aduma was not even slaughtered in the temple precinct. It was brought out to Mount of Olives instead, okay? And that's where it was slaughtered. But it was seen to have the same status as an offering that was made in the Azara, okay? V'chatat te'unat tzfona uktiv, and it was written about it, el nochach pnei ohel moed, okay, that it was opposite the Mishkan. Takinu la Rabbanan lishkat tzafona mizracha. And therefore the rabbis established that it should be done in a chamber, in other words, that they were brought, right, to a chamber in the northeast corner of the Azara. Ki hechi de lahave la hekera. So that in this case, it would be known that they would have some distinctive indicators, some significance. In other words, again, showing the status of the person doing the para aduma, that offering, para aduma, would have some such importance. Now we come back again to that question of what's the bira. By the way, let's see what the Gemara tells us. Amar Rabba bar Chana, he says, Avar Rabbi Yochanan, in the name of Rabbi Yochanan, Makom haya bahar habayat. There was a place on the Temple Mount, Ubira Shmo, and Bira was its name. Okay? Varesh Lakish wants to give a slightly different. Amar Kol HaMikdash, Kulo Karui Bira. Namely, according to Reish Lakish, the entire temple precinct was called the Bira. Shene'amar, citing a pasuk, Habira Asher Hachinoti, that was the location, so to speak, that Hashem had prepared. All right? Now, Minahani Mili, on what basis do we say this? Amar Rabbi Yomi, he says, Bar Chilkiah. Amar Rabbi Mechasya Bar Idi. Amar Rabbi Yochanan. In the name of Rabbi Yochanan, Amar Kra, as said in a pasuk, Ka'asher asa bayom hazeh, tziva Hashem la'asot, l'chaper aleichem, la'asot. So in other words, citing this pasuk in Vayikra, right, that it was done, I'm just paraphrasing for the moment, okay, that it was done on this day as commanded by Hashem to do for the sake of atonement for yourselves. Okay, so we have two verbs here, la'asot, to do, and then lechaper, for atonement, to atone. So with darshan, la'asot, what does it mean to do? Elu ma'aseh para. We might say that is the requirement to do the para aduma, lechaper, to atone, elu ma'aseh yom ha'kippurim. That is the other practices associated with the avoda of Yom HaKippurim. So Gemara wants to now bring us to a attempt at some point of clarification. Okay, to what does this verse that Rabbi Yochanan pointed us to? How does that identify that we're supposed to, that there is this requirement of the para aduma? Okay, why is that question ultimately important? Really, this should have been the very first question the Gemara asks, because the para aduma is for tahara, for purification purposes. It doesn't seem to be for the purpose of atonement. It doesn't seem to be like a chatas. Okay? And so the Gemara now proceeds. Bishlema kule kra bepara. That's understandable if we identify the entire pasuk regarding the para. Lo metukan. But that isn't established what it's for. Okay? In other words, that's basically our question. Okay? Right? In other words, does the details of the ritual that deals with ritual purity? It doesn't seem, however, to deal with the issue of atonement. Therefore, lechaper comes the other part of the verse, lechaper kativ upara lav bat kaparahi. And so the Gemara challenges and says, but isn't the para aduma, doesn't it have some aspect of atonement? Ela ema, but therefore I would say, kule kra biyom hakippurim kativ. No, that this entire pasuk has to do with the entire procedures of Yom Kippurim, Amrei, and therefore I might say as follows. Yalif might use another example from this pasuk to another pasuk to give me the basis for justifying para aduma association with Yom Kippur. Namely, I'll use a Gezerah Shava. All right? Tziva, tziva. This pasuk, remember we just cited, right? It says, Kasher sabiyom hazeh, tziva Hashem la'asot. Right? So what happens? And we have another pasuk, Ketiv hacha. It's written, tziva Hashem la'asot, as I just pointed out in the pasuk. Uktiv hatam. And elsewhere we have another pasuk that says, Zot chukat haTorah asher tziva Hashem lemor. That this is the chok of the Torah that Hashem was commanded. And that pasuk in Bamidbar does connect with the para. Malahalan para, afkan para. Umakan prisha, aflahalan prisha. So the same way that it deals with the para, right? And we said, okay, here in our case, that Kohen has to be secluded. So here too, therefore, that's our argument that shows that the Kohen, okay, is secluded. Ve'ema, and therefore I might say as we go on, the Amud Beis, tziva, tziva, the Yom HaKippurim. And therefore I make that parallel and say the Gezerah Shava of the word tziva for Yom Kippurim. I'll try that. Dichtiv, again, Vayas kasher tziva Hashem et Moshe. There we have a pasuk that says, as was, okay, Hashem commanded Moshe. Danim tziva delifnei asiyah, mitziva delifnei asiyah. Okay, but it's better, says the Gemara, for that Gezerah Shava to apply the word siva before a particular activity, okay, before to a pasuk that has siva again before a particular activity. Right? That's the point, right, that he's trying to make. All right. Now, what happens? Ve'ein danim siva de la'achar ma'asiyah. And therefore, we can't use that pasuk as Hashem commanded, because that is an example of a statement of command after an activity was done. Okay? Right? Tziva de lachari mitziva de lefnei asiyah. And therefore, we can't use that gezerah shava of a activity post, okay, versus the command to do an activity prior. So Gemara says, fine. All right, let's try another example to make a gezerah shava. Okay, ve'ema. I might therefore say, how about the following? I have tziva, the idea of command, to korbanot, with various offerings. Dichtiv biyom tzivato et bnei Yisrael. Why? Because it says on the day that it was commanded to the Jewish people. So again now, the Gemara is going to tell us, no, that attempted parallel or attempted gezerah shava also is not going to work. Why? Danin siva mitziva ve'ein danin tzivato mitziva. Because the words aren't exactly the same. We need for the gezerah shava to say the word siva and not the word tzivato, his command. So the Gemara, however, is going to object to that objection by telling us, umay nafkamina. So what really then is the difference between saying tziva, commanded, and sivto, his command being commanded? After all, I'm going to bring you an example where we still use sort of a gezerah shava, okay, but we don't even use the same exact words, because we have the following example. Vahatana debe Rabbi Yishmael, because wasn't it taught in the academy of Rabbi Yishmael, Vishav HaKohen, Uba HaKohen, okay, in regards to a Kohen examining a house that's potentially menuga, that's potentially has tzarat, all right? It says the Kohen comes and the Kohen goes. Zohi Shiva, Zohi Bia. Okay, one is coming, one is going. That isn't an exactly the same word, but nevertheless, okay, and according to the Academy of Rabbi Yishmael, that's still a viable gezerah shava. The Gemara answers, Hani mili hecha deleka dedamele. Okay, that works in a situation where we don't really have an exact parallel. I'm going to translate it that way. Aval hecha deika dedamele. But where there is where we can find an exact parallel in the language, midadamele, then we compare it. Okay. Midadamele yalfina. That's when we compare them and we learn from it. Okay. Now, having said that, we come back to what we said earlier. Our original pasuk that Rabbi Yochanan had cited, okay? Instead of attempting the gezerah shava on the word siva, let's see if we can make a different gezerah shava in order to still connect the para aduma for atonement, for which we said was purification, with the idea of atonement and Yom Kippurim. Because our pasuk said lechaper, to atone, okay? And then we said elu maaseh Yom HaKippurim. This applies to all of the procedures of Yom HaKippurim. Ve'ema, and I might say then, Kapara de korbanot. What about the fact that we have individual offerings whose purpose is atonement? Miyad inan, hai kohen mitrame baile prisha. If you're going to try to compare it to other examples of other offerings that bring atonement, and then you'd have to say, well, the Kohen who does those other offerings also would apparently need to be segregated for a week beforehand. Isn't that the case? And so that's what the Gemara asks. Miyad inan, do we even know, hey Kohen mitrame, which Kohen is the one that's chosen, associated, okay, debaile prisha, that he would need to be segregated, separated, amre, and therefore I might say, alama lo. Certainly, on this case, I would ask not, right? Nebaile prisha lekule mishmeret beit av. If that's the case, maybe we ought to suggest that the way you could do that is simply to segregate the entire Kohen family that had their circuit associated that particular offering. So the Gemara answers following: Danin davar shekavua lo zman midavar shekavua lo zman. No, says the Gemara. In order to make the parallel, we have to base it on something that is fixed in time, on something else that is fixed in time. So since the para aduma is fixed in time as to when it can be brought on Yom Kippurim, okay, in other words, and everything associated with Yom Kippurim, that's what we can have to look for. La'afuke, to exclude korbanot, dechol yoma itnahu, because other offerings of atonement can be brought on a daily basis, on any day. Fine, says the Gemara. Let's try to look for another parallel. Ve'ema regalim. So I would say, how about we look at a fixed time, namely other holidays? Danin davar, answers the Gemara, Danin davar shenoheg pam echad b'shana midavar hanoheg pam echad b'shana. No, says the Gemara, we can't do that because Yom Kippurim only occurs once a year, okay? And the other holidays, right, Shloshas Regalim, occur multiple times during the year. La'afuke Regalim, delav pam echad b'shana ninhu, because that excludes the other holidays that don't occur simply once a year. So the Gemara says, let's try one holiday. Ve'ema regel echad. So I'll say one holiday. And the Gemara answers, V'chitema lo yadinan aiminayu. And if you're going to say, I don't know which one of them, Chag HaMitzvot, Chag HaMatzot, if we're going to say it's Pesach, Ho'il upatach bo hakatuv tchila. Why? Because maybe when the Torah refers to the holidays, it says Pesach, Shavuot, Sukkot, right? In that order, and therefore it begins with it first. Chag HaSukkot. Or maybe I would choose Chag HaSukkot, Ho'il umeruba mitzvoto. Why? Because it has multiple mitzvahs associated with it. Ella, says the Gemara, answering again, Danin prishat shiva liyom echad mi prishat shiva liyom echad. No, we have to deal with the segregation, the separation of 7 days for one occasion, one day, to another situation where we have separation of 7 days for one day. Ve'ein danim prishat shiva l'shiva. And we cannot separate 7 days for 7 days. Mi prishat shiva liyom echad. for separation of 7 days for 1 day. Fine, says the Gemara. I'll try the following. Ve'ema, I would say, how about the following? Shmini, okay? Namely, what we're talking about is Shmini Atzeret. What about that example? The Prishat Shiva Liyom Echadhu. Why? Because then I could have separation of 7 days for the 1 day. The Gemara answers, no, that's not going to work either. The Danin Davar She'en Kedusha Lefanav Midavar She'en Kedusha Lefanav. No, we have to make our parallel, says Gemara, and learn from a situation where there is nothing preceding that 1 day that has sanctity from something else that does not have anything of sanctity leading up to that 1 day. Ve'ein danin davar sheyesh kedusha lefanav, and we do not make our gzera shava, okay, our parallel, all right, from something that has sanctity leading up to it. Midavar she'ein kedusha lefanav, from something that doesn't have sanctity leading up to it. Okay, so the Gemara challenges that thought and says, "V'lav kal v'chomer hi." Who? But can't I say that I could make a kal v'chomer, a fortiori argument here? Hashta, here, davar she'en kedusha lefanav, by that here I have a situation where there's something that does not have any segregation or separation, okay, before it, still requires, okay, separation. Davar sheyesh kedusha lefanav, something that does have sanctity before it. Certainly, should that not then all the more have some segregation or separation in advance of it as well? Amar Rav Masharshia, says Rav Masharshia, lo, that's not the case. Why? Because it says hazeh, right? Because our pasuk, right, says, right, that Rabbi Yochanan said, kasher asa bayom hazeh tziva Hashem la'asot v'chaper aleichem. Because it said, on this day, right? Kativ kazeh. That means on a day like this. Right? Now, to finish up, Rav Ashi Amar. So what did Rav Ashi say? Mi ika midi de ikar regel lo bai prisha. So he asks the question, Rav Ashi, as a saying, is there any holiday, okay, that that requires mide de ika, that requires the removal, the separation, okay, lo bai prisha, okay, that would require this separation. So therefore he answers, tafel didei bai prisha, okay, right? So in other words, something that is lesser, okay, or minor than this, we would require prisha. In other words, that Shmini Atzeret is a lesser aspect, a lesser occasion, okay, than that of Sukkot itself. And so the Gemara answers, Va'afilu laman da'amar Shmini regel b'fnei atzmo. Excuse me, even according to those who might say that Shmini Atzeret is a separate holiday unto itself, right? Hanimili le'ilan le'inyan. We'll just roll over a tiny bit. Pazar kashav. Okay, this only refers to this mnemonic device, okay, of the situation, right? Pazar kashav is an abbreviation for pay or pious, that Shmini Atzeret has a separate lottery for the Kohanim. Zman, that we say a separate Shehechiyanu blessing for the time. Regel, some consider it, not everybody, a separate holiday. Korban, that the offerings are not part of the order of Sukkot offerings. Okay? That Shira, that Shmini Atzeret has a separate psalm for itself, different from Sukkot, and bracha, that additional blessing said in Birkat Hamazon and Amida for it. Okay? Aval le'inyan tashlumin, but in regards to the making up, let's say, the festival offering, tashlumin derishon hu. Okay, but there in that case, okay, it's like a continuation of the first day. And then tomorrow we'll pick up with the rest of this piece, okay, on Gimel, right? And as I said, the link, if you're going to do the Siyum by Zoom, that is the same, I believe, same link that we normally now do for the DAF, right? Harvey, right? Is that what you?
That's what I was told.
Okay.
Yeah.
I didn't check the numbers myself, but that I believe is the case, right? And I will check. I will look. We're supposed to have in Shul on 8 o'clock on Thursday morning for Yom Ha'atzmaut. So we'll have to readjust the time for the shiur Thursday morning. I'll try to get a time how long that davening is going to be, and we'll see if we can set up another time. Okay, everybody? So everybody,
Thank you very much. Have a
Thank
great
you.
day. Be
take
well.
care.
Thank you. All the best.
Kodesh Tov.
And nice
Kodesh
to
Tov.
see Benny. Nice to see you on, Benny. Nice, Jeffrey. Nice to see you too. Okay, everybody stay